Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the Produce Buzzers podcast. We are so happy you have joined us today, and I think you will be too after the show is over, because you will learn a lot about fresh fruits and vegetables, how to select and store them, how to prepare and cook them, and surprising facts about their history and origin. We hope it inspires you to eat more fresh fruits and vegetables, not only for your health, but also for your delight and pleasure as you explore their amazing world of taste and delicious flavors. Eating more of them will transform your life in so many positive ways. So settle back, relax, and get ready for another delicious adventure with the Produce Buzzers. Greetings and welcome to the Produce Buzzers podcast. I'm Edwin Stepp, your host, and I'm joined once again by Teresa Nolan, the founder and president of Produce Buzz, as well as Rick Stepp and Cynthia Benedetto, both contributing editors to Produce Buzz. Now, Produce Buzzers podcast fans, we have a guest today who is doing some very important, monumental work in agriculture. He is leading a renaissance in agriculture that is spreading across the country and indeed across the globe. With this movement, he believes that hunger can be eliminated, but he has asserted that food is not a right, but a privilege. His work is not just in theory. He has been spearheading grassroots efforts in local communities in Southern California for years, not just to provide food to needy people, but to teach them all about how food is grown and the tremendous effort that goes into producing it. A.G. Kawamura is our guest today. He is a third-generation produce grower and shipper from Orange County, California. From 2003 to 2010, he served as a secretary of the California Department of Food and Agriculture. He is a founding co-chair of Solutions from the Land, a nationally recognized nonprofit that is developing innovative and sustainable climate-smart collaborations for 21st century agriculture. He serves on multiple boards and advisory committees, including the Farm Foundation Board and the Western Growers Board. For over 40 years, Mr. Kawamura has pursued a lifelong goal to work towards an end to end hunger and malnutrition. He is passionate about using every space that is available and practical to grow food, especially in urban areas where food is needed most. He is the founding chair of Solutions for Urban Agriculture. He has worked closely with regional food banks and stakeholders to create exciting urban ag projects that focus on nutrition, hunger, education, and advanced food systems. As a progressive farmer, Mr. Kawamura has a lifetime of experience working within the shrinking rural and urban boundaries of Southern California. He has been called one of the most talented agricultural specialists in the world. And I think after you hear what he has to say today, you will agree. Welcome to the show, AG. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Edwin, for that overwhelming introduction.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us. You said in your bio, you're a third-generation farmer. Tell us about your family's history. How did they get started in agriculture? And tell us the history.
Sure. Our family on all sides, my grandparents, that first generation, all came to California in the early 1900s from Japan. And so I'd be a third generation. They call that a Sansei, Japanese American. And then they were involved in different parts of agriculture through both grandparents. And of course, World War II was a tough time for Japanese immigrants and families, and so they were all in camp. My parents were both born in Los Angeles, and when the war broke out, one had just graduated from college, and the other, my mom, was just entering college.
Right.
And it was after World War II, then our company, which was originally called Western Marketing Company, was created out of Glendale, Arizona. When they got out of camp, they had been in the agricultural business, and my grandfather recognized there was an opportunity to take some produce that was being grown in the Arizona area near Glendale, Arizona, and was able to ship it back to the LA market, which he was familiar with. And with that vision, I guess, and opportunity to bring back some veggies back into town from in the winter months, especially there coming out of Arizona, that opened the door, and our company then was founded. Western Marketing Company was founded in 1946, and our label was originally called the Western Chief label. Today, I
Ah.
think that might be a little bit of politically incorrect because it was a Tecumseh Indian head. That was
Yeah,
our main brand for all those years.
right.
We changed that company to Orange County Produce in 1994 after my father had passed. So
Mm.
we've been a grower shipper. That's the term we use in the produce industry for all these years since 1946, and we are in the strawberry and vegetable business. We've evolved quite a bit. We're centered out of Orange County originally, and I was born in Los Angeles, but we moved here in 1958. So I'm a
Hmm.
68-year-old farming, third generation farmer.
Wow.
And with that, we've watched the urbanization of one of the greatest farm regions of the world, actually. Orange County and Los Angeles County was a big, alluvial fan, if you will, of along the coast,
Right.
Mediterranean climate. And in its heyday, LA was the number one producing county in the country, with
Hmm.
Orange County in that top five as well. About the time I was born, all of that started to easily change. And today, there's very little ground left to farm on. That's why we like to say, and interestingly, we lease all the ground we farm on here in Orange County for the last 36 years, 37 years. So
Hmm.
I'm a leasehold farmer, landless farmer, if you will, and we've learned how to farm on everything from vacant lots to under the power lines. I'm on military bases. We look for our usual theme is if we can see a vacant lot or a field that has good looking weeds, we know that it's probably a pretty good piece of ground. And if we can find a source of water, then we find that hookup, and we're an irrigated farming company. We're not rain fed.
Yeah.
We depend on irrigated water. Of course, we're in a Mediterranean dry climate, and we produce year round. So that's the
Yeah.
kind of the background. And we've become innovative. It's interesting. You can say that we're land managers with an edible landscape theme
Oh, I
because
love that.
that's true.
That is great.
We know that we're a value to the landowners that we work with, and they might be developers, they might be the military, they might be the University of California. But land left abandoned has weed problems, has rodent problems, has people throwing trash on their properties. So
Yeah.
we've always recognized that we were of an asset to the landowner if we can leave the ground looking good, to be good to the neighbors. But more importantly, if we can grow our fruits and vegetables here,
Yeah.
it's a great place to do it.
Yeah. There's a lot of pressure on any empty land there because of housing and other commercial ventures. I lived in Pasadena, and my neighborhood, when you look at old photos from the early 1900s, it was just miles and miles of citrus and avocado trees. And now it's all housing developments. So hats off to you for uh, kind of fighting against that and resisting that and finding places to grow food, which is needed in those urban areas. That's a big part of what you do. As the land kind of disappeared for agriculture, you were still finding ways to grow in those areas.
Well, you have to be many times we're just grateful that we happen to land in the industry that we're in. In our case, we were in the strawberry business. We still are in a very significant way.
Yeah.
We were growing, interestingly, green beans, which was a good crop to grow during the summer when it was too hot to grow the strawberries here.
Ah.
And then we used to be in all the different veggies like zucchini, yellow squash, a
Hmm.
little bit of peppers. And we were originally in the celery business, and with that came other brassicas as well as this cabbage. We never were really in the cauliflower broccoli business, but really celery was our core business with strawberries, and then
Yeah.
a summer vegetable batch. But in doing that, we were fortunate. Being a shipper, we worked directly with the chain stores. And
Ah.
that was in the course of my lifetime. I sat on the desk about the time I met Teresa. I was still on the desk selling strawberries and vegetables. And we evolved from selling both to the terminal markets and the chain stores. We never really got very involved in food service. And eventually we evolved even away from the terminal markets and had almost all of our business with the chain stores. Fortunately, when the pandemic broke out, good example, we weren't held captive by the collapse of the food service industry during the
Right.
shutdown. We were fortunate to continue to be shipping with the chain stores, and
Yeah.
that's just being in the right place, the right time, more than anything else. But
Right.
our business model has always been that, and the reason actually we work with the chain stores is because we were originally a regional shipper only, and that was
Okay.
easier for the chain stores to work with regionals because that's was the way it was set up. Whereas food service really did ask more for a more year-round supply of product, and at the time, some 30, 40 years ago, we were regional only. About 30 years ago, we became year-round in green beans. And then about 10, 12 years ago, we became year-round with strawberries.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
anyway,
Year round with strawberries means you have to go outside of Southern California, I think, probably,
that's
right?
right. And with
Yeah.
green beans as well. So we've been in
Yeah.
Mexico for 30 plus years,
Right.
working with just only a grower or two actually for many years. And currently with our strawberries, we have more a larger grower group that we work with. But and our core business then of strawberries is a separate company now called Gempack, which you might
Yes.
know.
Yeah, I'm aware
And
of it.
but our company here in Orange County, still Orange County Produce, and we continue to evolve those crops that we can grow very well here. It's been really hard to compete, whether it's conventional or organic, and because we're really in direct competition with Baja California right here in Southern Cal.
Right.
Same season, same growing seasons, and that's really has made it hard for us to compete at a just a commodity level
Yeah.
marketplace. So we keep on evolving, and we're now uh, doing interesting projects, including a fairly large project growing food for the food bank.
Well, let's talk about these food banks because, a few years ago, you became inspired to take a broader action to get in to help the communities with the food issues and food safety. Tell us how that came about and what you did to respond.
Sure. And that actually is, I know this pretty well because it's my daughter's 39. So 37 years ago, we
Ah,
recognized that we were seeing a lot of our vegetable crops basically being thrown away for cosmetic reasons, right? A
yeah.
wormhole, uh, different challenges, scraping on squash or whatever it was, and you'd throw away a tremendous amount. There was a group of concerned citizens in the area here in Irvine that saw that there was an opportunity maybe to come in and glean in the fields behind the farmer's harvest. We said no, of course, at first, because we thought the liability we had heard was just tremendous if they were to get in an accident. And there was a story where a couple families are in a tomato field and the kids pick up tomato stakes and start sword fighting, and one kid pokes the other kid's eye out and they sue the
Oh,
farmer.
wow.
Oh
And
gosh.
that kind of those kind of stories were out there, and they said, yeah, you don't want to let people in your fields. But on a given day that we were throwing away a tremendous amount of cabbage, I remember calling the group up and said, you can't come into the field, but please bring as many boxes and bags. And instead of throwing these beautiful heads of cabbage on the ground, we'll throw them in your bags. And that very first day, we must have given them a couple thousand pounds of cabbage,
Wow.
which made them happy, made the food bank happy. And that was our first handhold with the food bank locally. And that then continued to develop. We actually then, the gleaning group, we eventually, they were called the Irvine Gleaning Task Force, and they evolved into Orange County Harvest, which was a nonprofit we began then with our company,
Hmm.
helping out. But there was a 501c3 that existed as a gleaning operation, and my wife was really instrumental in helping pull together all the volunteers. Uh, uh, on any given weekend, we'd have 1,800, hundreds of volunteers come out to
Hmm.
do gleaning in the local farm fields here. And that was at a time that's in the mid 80s,
Way
late
ahead of
80s,
the,
early
yeah.
90s, when there was still a lot of agriculture here in the area.
Right.
In the late 80s, there's the Good Samaritan Act passed, that said that if you were in an act of a charity, you would have some kind of protection, liability protection. And we took that as a clue that we could open up our fields to the volunteers if they signed a waiver.
Yeah.
And to this day, we've had, tens of thousands or more, actually, because it's many years now, of volunteers that have come into the fields to do harvest work or gleaning work. And it was about that time, after several years of many volunteers of gleaning, that we said, well, why don't we grow some of this stuff so that the gleaners can move to harvesting? And when they're harvesting, they're just much more productive, because you're not, picking whatever you can find in the field. You're picking a actually harvesting crop.
Oh,
And that was the big step forward. And that was about 25 years ago, closer to 30 years ago, when we actually started to custom grow food for the food banks. But at small 3 to 4, 5, 6 acre plots. We have a wonderful park. It's called the Incredible Edible Park in
yes, I
Irvine.
read about that.
And the reason it's a park is they said they wouldn't let us do it if it was a farm. So we couldn't have an incredible edible farm because it wasn't zoned for farming. But we got rejected at the city council level. We came back a couple of months later and said, we have a new plan. We're going to build you an edible park. They'll have a bike path and benches in it, but it's horticulture, not agriculture. And the city council
Brilliant.
said, okay. And it's
Yeah.
still there. It's still there today. It's a citrus park in Irvine, one of the
Wow.
oldest edible parks, I think, in America, when I
Yeah.
think about it.
That's
Um,
brilliant. You were way ahead of the time.
well, those proof of
Seeing,
concept projects all around the county at 3, 4, 5 acres, we had quite a few of those, and they gave us the confidence to know that this is something that actually this food bank wants and really needs, is fresh produce. And it was before the realization that nutrient dense foods is so important for the diet of so many.
right.
But by having that background, our latest project, which is now a full 3 years old, in fact, it's 3 years old just a few days ago, we're harvesting an acre a week, delivering about 40,000 pounds weekly to the same Second Harvest Food Bank in our area, being planted, cultivated, weeded, and harvested by volunteers almost
Wow.
entirely. I'm the farmer of record that gets the fields ready for planting and for growing them and getting them to harvest. And we really do. We deliver in the
That is,
summer here. We've been harvesting watermelons, honeydews, bell peppers, some jalapenos, interestingly, zucchini, squash, and yellow squash. We've got some green beans coming up, and then we have some winter squash coming, butternut and spaghetti squash. And in the winter, we have a pretty solid plan of cabbage, broccoli, and cauliflower, a little bit of broccolini. But every week, we're basically harvesting about an acre of those
wow. That
products.
is amazing.
And
40,000 pounds. That's
and it's
fantastic. So
so
I,
it's well over eight, well now over 8 million pounds, if I'm correct, over 25,000 volunteers in a 3 year period.
wow.
If you think about it, a food bank is like a DC. It has all kinds of different outlets. There might be a soup kitchen, pantries, it might be church, might be different kinds of places where feeding takes place. And the clientele of the food banks are of course those in need. They decide who gets the products. We just try and get the product there, because we don't have um, forced air cooling. We don't have a hydro cool. We don't have a vacuum cool. All the things we've been growing for the most part have been products that are pretty durable and don't necessarily need that kind of pre-cool to take the heat out, although it's always the best way to do it. And then so we're still working on that. But the food banks definitely have cold storage. So if we can get morning products that is harvested in the morning to the food bank, for example, it still has some pretty good shelf life and keeps the freshness pretty good. Here's a good example. We grew a beautiful crop of celery. We didn't get it cooled correctly going into the food bank, and it went limp. And so, yeah, limp celery, although you can use it in a soup, is not the greatest thing to, hand out. So we learn these things as we go. A lot of it is previous information of what we know will work. A good example, watermelons is, boy, what a great crop that is to grow for a food bank. And these days, because watermelons, it's been shown has some good nutrient value too. Isn't that exciting?
Yeah.
And also the things that we've chosen to grow for the program in the first 2 years, especially, were products that gave us a lot of pounds per acre, which helped us drive the cost down for the food banks down into the 20, 30 cents a pound range.
Wow.
For those of us in the produce industry, I think we need to remember that in many cases it's 50, 60, 70% of the cost of getting the product out of the field and into a box and into through cooling and trucking. That's not the cost of growing, that's the cost of harvest and handling, right?
Yeah.
And that's where the greatest cost comes once it gets out of and you sell it on the market. But if the food banks, for example, who have trucks, who have containers, they have bins, they have all the things, and if they supply the volunteers as well, that's how we were able to drive these prices to a point where they actually also then have money to buy these products at that 20 to 30 cents a pound. Traditionally, you used to hear that food banks can buy stuff for 10 cents a pound, and they still have those kinds of programs here in California and other places. But you kind of realize that 10 cents a pound 20 years ago might have made some sense. These days, I wish we could get the price up to 50 cents a pound or 60 cents a pound that the food banks can buy product at. And you still can't necessarily find that at the chain store. But
Right.
not with those kinds of numbers, these kinds of projects as an augmentation to a steady diet, an augmentation to a food supply are very, very viable. And we're excited about that, and especially the idea that now you can also start to look at some other items in the produce department that we can grow and put into some of these projects and get them. Let's say it's going to be kohlrabi, or let's say it's leeks, or even some of the different specialty lettuces. Bok choy is always a good one, for example. But more and more, the idea is to explore the possible with what you already recognize is a pretty good model for the food banks nationally to change a little bit how they go about sourcing food, how they go about realigning resources, and more importantly, how they go about starting to see the total diet, if you will, as an exciting part of how we end hunger.
Yeah, that's
Well, and
amazing, the variety you've mentioned that you're growing in these these places for food banks, because you typically think, well, there's only going to be a few varieties that you could do in any practical sense. But I'm amazed at how many different varieties you've mentioned.
and so one of the things that I took away that was interesting is that I think that when you first started, whatever I want to say it was cabbage, but it was such an amount that she's like, I couldn't move this. Like, maybe I don't know. I think if you're saying you could move 1,000 pounds a week, like maybe you were like, yeah, we've got 20,000 pounds here. And she's like, I'll die with it. And so instead of scaling a business, you had to figure out how to reduce the yield that would be the proper amount that the food bank could then utilize as well, and just be able to move and distribute in an equitable manner. But then so that I thought was amusing. But then also the fact that your food bank, she can barter, and I guess I don't know why I keep saying she, like maybe they can barter extra produce for items and I didn't know, was that milk or was that bread? What were the food banks able to barter with your produce that was extra?
And that's exactly. We started originally with cabbage, and we were told that they could handle 80 500-pound bins per week. So that's how we got to the 40,000 pounds. And I remember thinking immediately, oh, I know something that's 40,000 pounds an acre. That's cabbage. And so when we first started harvesting, we flooded the food bank markets, if you will, with cabbage.
It's a lot of
which is
coleslaw.
something we've always done, I guess. I don't know incorrectly.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
How are the food banks funded? Do they get federal money, or is it all volunteer?
It's all the above. There's certainly federal funds, there's state funds, there's and then donor funds coming from the community, coming from companies. Here's a good example. Some of the biggest some of the biggest groups of volunteers we get are corporate volunteers. As you see people cleaning up trash on the side of the road with their little vests on, those same companies basically pay their employees to go do community service giving. And so a lot of our volunteers come directly from the many corporations in the region. We have 20 million people that live within an hour and a half of our farms here in Orange County. So there's a lot of people to choose from. We've barely tapped into the public schools, although we do get some public schools coming out. But you can imagine every senior in the region has to do some community service learning opportunities. We love elementary school kids. We love junior high school kids. They all get a learning experience like nothing else. They see things growing. They get to see the threats to agriculture from weeds. They get to see pest damage. They, all the reality of being in a field for a couple hours and giving back to community is all pretty good stuff. They get to see professional harvesters and professional art crews working side by side and understand in a second how much productivity there is. And then Cynthia, getting back to your observation, when we have too much of a product, there's no such thing as too much. When there is, some food banks will get a bunch of table grapes, a rejected load of table grapes, or in our case, we know there's rejected loads of strawberries, unfortunately, that get into the food banks. And we recognize that instead of getting rejected loads when the market's really lousy, how great it would be to have a little better communication between supply and demand so that our products could get to a food bank instead of the horrible, you send a product to Chicago or to New York, it gets rejected. And before you know it, you get a shipping bill for every tray that you send out there to throw away. And by the time you've lost that much quality out of it, it makes no sense if there was a better way to do it. And I think there's some wonderful opportunities here for some really good strategies to address our oversupply in the regular market, the commercial market. When we have oversupply, there should be a better way to address our outlets. Obviously, with processed foods, let's say it's processed strawberries, processed cranberries, you have AMS and some of the other programs at USDA that could move product once it's in a processed state. But dealing with fresh produce, perishables, is always going to be challenging. But that being said, there's all kinds of opportunities and solutions out there for us to work with.
Yeah, fantastic. That is quite a logistical problem or challenge, let's put it that way, to get fresh produce to the end user before it goes bad. So hats off to you for that. You talked about.
I was going to say, I know in your state, in North Carolina, my good friend Steve Troxler, the Ag Secretary, Ag Commissioner there, he's as far as I remember and understand, there's I think 3 states in the nation that the departments of agriculture are fully engaged with the school lunch programs. And so that's New Jersey, it's North Carolina, it's Texas. And we always said, God, wouldn't that be great if every Department of Agriculture in every state got to run the lunch program with working with the departments of education for diets and the other things about nutrients. But on the supply side, being able to do a much better job of getting a great supply of food into each of those cafeterias. Wouldn't that be exciting? Especially for those of us it's always, Teresa, it's always about the fruit and vegetable industry for me.
Yes.
But that's not necessarily true. But it's a big part of this idea that there's some really good solutions out there for us to work towards.
Yeah.
Well, loving the fruit and vegetable industry is a good thing to make your life about, because that helps everybody if they can eat good fruits and vegetables.
Well, that's interesting about the 3 states. I did not know that. And of course, you were the Secretary of Agriculture in California for many years. How did that come about? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
It was a opportunity, a door of opportunity that opened up because Governor Schwarzenegger came in on a recall. We had recalled Gray Davis in our state. And in that election, Governor Schwarzenegger was able to step in as a disruptor, if you will. having not run for political office before that, he was able to step in, and without that political baggage, many of us that ended up working, I believe, this is my observation in his administration, the cabinet secretaries, we all came out of the policy world. And I had been involved with both Farm Bureau and Western Growers, being a county Farm Bureau president and then chairman of Western Growers. I had been on the Strawberry Advisory Board way before that. And because of the Strawberry Advisory Board, now the Strawberry Commission, I remember I was fortunate to work in the Foreign Ag Services, the Agricultural Technical Advisory Committee, and ATAC, for fruits and vegetables, dealing with exports. And so that was a little window of time. And then I was, more than anything, I was fortunate to be a Governor Wilson appointee on the State Board of Agriculture. And that's, I think, the one position that allowed me to understand what the Department of Agriculture was all about, because we were basically advisors to the department and to the governor. And then I survived 4 years when Governor Davis was there. So I'd been on the State Board of Agriculture quite a while. And when that door opened, that Governor Davis was recalled, and there was a new governor with a need for a new secretary in all the cabinet spaces, a new administration. That's how that door opened up. And it was a little bit of politicking, a little bit of being in the right place, the right time, a little bit of just understanding that who'd be dumb enough to take that job.
Well, I think they chose you because of how smart you were and your experience.
Well,
but it's not. It's not always a rewarding
yeah.
job, is it?
Well, no, it was tremendously rewarding. It gave me greater respect, I'd say, for the function of government than ever before, because you got to see some of the most incredible public servants throughout government, but especially in our Department of Agriculture, that spend a lifetime believing in the structure that allows agriculture to do well. And they're in any other world that would understand the critical infrastructure of food safety, food protection, invasive species protection, they'd be heroes, but we just don't acknowledge them to be heroes.
Yeah,
but
that's a very good point.
Such a privilege to be able to work suddenly for all these folks that were just believed in their mission. Each department in government has a mission, and we're blessed by it. But it's also dangerous when we forget what the mission is, or when we forget why the mission is so important, which seems to be the case these days more than not.
Yes.
We here at Produce Buzz, we like to tout this a lot about how difficult agriculture is, the challenges that farmers face, and try to educate our audience to those challenges. They're at the mercy of Mother Nature, the pests you talk about, weather, all of this. So I really appreciate you mentioning that about the challenges of coordinating agriculture, which I think is a big part of your mission from the education side, to tell people how to try to educate people, young people especially, how food is grown and the challenges that come with that. Tell us a bit more about that.
Well, we have a national group called Solutions from the Land.
Yes.
And that was born out of the climate conference held in Copenhagen in 2009, COP15, if I'm not mistaken. And it was at that conference, several of us from California, the cabinet officers were there, Mike Christman, rest his soul, and our EPA director at the time too. We were fortunate to be there. Governor Schwarzenegger was a big believer in renewable energy, and that was the entree for letting someone like me be there, representing renewable energy coming out of manure, for example, to energy, or compost, bioenergy opportunity. As you look at that, we call it the circularity, where there's no waste on a farm. But we were dismayed at that conference that nobody, and I mean nobody, was talking about the global food system as it would be affected by significant change in climate. And whether you're a climate change believer or a changing climate believer, or both, we said unpredictable weather means unpredictable harvest. And if you don't recognize that might be one of the biggest threats for the populations on the planet,
Absolutely.
Why would that be? And why wouldn't we have a chance to talk more about it? We complained loudly enough that several groups said, well, if you feel so strongly about it, why don't you do something about it? And that was Farm Foundation out of Chicago. It was the Nature Conservancy, UN Foundation, Conservation International, and a few others that stepped up and said, here, go talk about the future of agriculture for the United States. And that's what our first project was, as Solutions from the Land Dialogue. And then later in 2021, we came out with this report called the 21st Century Agricultural Renaissance.
Oh,
But I would want to say that our current work as a group, Solutions from the Land, is to make sure that the voice of the farmer, the rancher, the forester, the fisherman, fisherfolk, fisherwoman, if that's the case, and the folks that deal with animals or the flora and the fauna that we all work with, that voice is heard in these deliberations about how do we address climate, or how do we address pollution, how do we address biodiversity loss. And for example, biodiversity loss is, you say, what does that mean? But if you use the word invasive species, in a minute you understand, wow, there's all kinds of things that want to come into your forest, into your desert, into your fields, and mess up your harvests, or mess up the biodiversity that exists, or the habitat that exists.
Yeah.
And it's one of the biggest challenges we have, but it's also one of the things that is rarely ever talked about.
Interesting.
So dealing with all these things through Solutions from the Land has been a wonderful opportunity to work with some really great thought leaders, but more importantly, a bunch of producers that are already showcasing on their own farms this idea that agriculture is the solution, not the problem. And we run into it everywhere, that people think agriculture is the problem, even though they eat every day,
right?
And they have plenty of choices of what they eat.
Yeah.
We believe sincerely that, when we create abundance, we all get to live. When we live in a world of scarcity, we're in a world of survival.
And that was one of the things I was impressed with in researching what you're doing. I saw your TED talk that you did. I don't know, it's probably about 10 years ago, but you in there you said that a lot of people think the agricultural system is broken and it needs to be just uprooted and turn it over and restructure and everything. And you said, no, that's not the case. It's working quite well. And then I keyed in on this word renaissance. And, I like that term. Renaissance means rebirth. What they're talking about is revolution, but renaissance to me implies we're getting back to principles that we once had and perhaps lost. Am I right? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think when we use the word renaissance, it's all of the above, but this cascade of new knowledge, or the ability to understand old knowledge. So ancient knowledge linked together with new knowledge, new technology. You can see it within the span of a single lifetime that we've gone. My dear friend that just passed away at 99 years old, he knows the names of his horses he used to plow his fields. So can you imagine, in 100-year span of time, we went from no tractors on most of the farms in America, seriously, to where we are today with drones doing work, So the Renaissance refers to this idea. It is rebirth. It is a renewal. It is an understanding that with new knowledge, you get to look at the world differently. Our Solutions from the Land 21st Century Renaissance report, it was able to, we kind of had an aha moment where we looked at the Sustainable Development Goals, which most of the people in the United States don't know what those are, but the United Nations came out with 17 Sustainable Development Goals in 2015, with the idea that we could accomplish those goals by the year 2030. If you look at the goals close, it describes a world that doesn't exist yet, because it describes a world that kind of finally achieves harmony across so many different, dimensions. But you realize that you can't accomplish the goals because 7 or 8 of them have a lot to do, or 9 of them have a lot to do with agriculture.
Right.
And if agriculture is not doing well on the planet, you'll never accomplish those goals. And that gave us then a different way to describe why agriculture is so important. And more importantly, why the rest of the world, the rest of the people that eat every day, need to support agriculture instead of attack it and help us succeed. so that we can achieve these goals. And something as simple as hunger, now that we've gone through COVID, and now that we've seen some of these other enormous transformations of the food industry to pivot and turn during COVID, you realize that actually ending hunger is one of the easiest on the list. And ending nutrient deficiency is one of the easiest things on the list to accomplish. We just haven't had the imagination to get it done. We have the capacity to do it. Hell, we've had the capacity to do it for 50 years.
Wow.
But we globally, and I speak about this globally, but we haven't had the imagination to get it done. And I think that's what's starting to drive us forward now, is projects like we have here with our food bank, where we could have done this same exact project again 30, 40 years ago easily, but we just didn't imagine it that way. So with a renaissance comes an imagination. With that imagination comes a better idea of what's feasible becomes more possible, right?
Right.
And
I saw a quote from you.
living.
I saw a quote from you, and I may butcher this, so as I try to pull it out of my feeble memory, but I think you said, if we can grow food everywhere, anywhere, then hunger will be nowhere. Is that an accurate quote?
It's our elevator pitch for our local nonprofit called Solutions for Urban Agriculture.
Okay.
That's at sfua.org. But no, we just said we believe that we can build edible landscapes everywhere, so there's hunger nowhere.
Right. Okay. I did butcher it, but I'm glad you clarified.
And we do believe that. We do believe that. It's amazing. If you drive through any city, any urban area, everything that's green could be something that produces a fruit or vegetable, right?
Yeah.
Or a fiber or something. But and you have to irrigate, you have to fertilize, you have to trim, you have to all the landscaping that gets done in the world. So it's not a problem with capacity to grow enough food for the planet at this point. We have all the capacity in the world, but to get it to everybody in an affordable way, or in a way that understands that it's a food as medicine type of investment in the humans, especially young kids, seniors too. I mean, this idea that we day after day haven't felt the crisis that with each day that goes by that you don't have a good diet for these young kids, very young kids.
Yeah.
You can't get those days back for their development, cognitive or other. It's just like the plants in my field. If I screw up and when they're young, guess what? They're never going to reach their full potential. What makes us think that people are any different?
Yeah. And I believe you've put in some farms in schools too, haven't you?
We've done a bunch of different projects over the years, and those ended up being the proof of concept we had, if you will, that allowed us to see that so much is possible if you just kind of rethink what your information base is, what there's so you have, if you can realign your resources with a different vision of what you want to accomplish from them. We're big believers in 1 + 1 = 3.
I like that synergy.
Collaborative innovation creates that opportunity for doing synergy. That. We want to understand the science. We're dependent on the science to give us a robust box of tools, if you will. You don't have to use every tool in the toolbox. So whether it's biotech, whether it's ancient tools that we put into play, and we're learning that, again, the science is advanced enough now to describe what goes on with the ancient methods, right? We're excited about having this knowledge come in at the right time for us to get to the safest food supply we can have.
And more abundant. Go ahead, Teresa.
Does that make sense? I did want to make a quick comment about that. Food is a privilege, not a right.
Yes, I did want to come back to that.
I know I get yelled at by a few of my friends that believe that food is a right, and I'd be the first to say, if we had so much abundance, and we kind of do, that everybody should have a right to access to it. But the fact that I like to say it's a privilege is because I don't know that I can get my crop from the farm out of the field to a table because of all these things that are constantly challenging our ability to get to harvest. It could be a quarantine. It can be again, an invasive species, an outbreak of disease, insect disease, depredation. I currently lost 20% of a crop of watermelons to crows who figured out how to poke a hole in the watermelon and eat them,
Uh,
eat parts of them, and then leave them that we can't get them even to the food bank because they got a hole punched in them.
right.
And it's what do you call it? A murder of crows. I have a very smart
That's-
murder of crows. We've always maintained that the oldest conflict in the history of mankind is that there are things that want to eat you, there's things that want to eat your food supply or your domestic animal or chew on your house for that matter.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yes.
Nothing's ever changed. It's for people to think that something's different. It's not. It's just as complex.
We're
as
all in the
every-
food supply. We're all in the food chain. Well, we've probably taken too much of your time. There's so many more questions I could ask you. Maybe we'll have to have you back sometime. But this has been fantastic. I really appreciate you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I was going to tell Cynthia, hey, Cynthia, out my window here is a pumpkin patch for that's going to go for Glenn Tanaka's opening days.
Oh my gosh.
We had Glenn on the show as well, and we had Ron Inatomi, who came on to talk about the contribution that Japanese Americans have made to American agriculture. And of course, we couldn't talk about that without talking about the internment camps. And that's a moving story, all of that. And your family went through it. So we just want to hats off to you for sticking with it.
We all have some pretty big shoulders that we get to stand on. And that was an amazing generation.
Yeah.
Your dad and mother were two of my favorite people in the strawberry industry. And I'll never forget them. And our association with you too, AG, it was great.
Thanks, Teresa. I appreciate that. And those were, again, it's funny to watch it's been fun to watch our industry, the strawberry industry, evolve and develop. And we still believe it's such a great product because it does taste good and it is good for you, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Beautiful. They're beautiful too. Okay, now we're going to let you go. There's just one more thing you have to do before we leave.
Sorry. I'm apologizing in advance.
This is a ritual we make all our guests go through on the Produce Buzzers podcast. And here's the deal. Teresa loves puns, and she always brings out a pun for the podcast to torture our guests with. Okay. So we call this segment Homegrown because the puns are so bad. You can't laugh at it. You got to groan. Okay. So we're going to put you through this torture and then we'll let you go. Teresa, what's the homegrown of the day?
Okay, AG. Why did the strawberry call his buddies for help?
Okay. So we're going to try to guess it too. It's got to be a punny answer. Why did the strawberries call his buddies for help? Any ideas?
Because he was very troubled.
That's good.
Well
Love
done.
it.
Rick, you got any ideas?
Oh boy, now I'm stumped because AG had such a good answer.
Okay, we're going to give up. AG's already given us a good one. So,
that's all.
Teresa, why did the strawberry call his buddies for help?
Because he was in a jam.
That makes sense.
Too late though by then, isn't it?
Again, thank you all for all you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for all you do for helping move fresh produce.
Yeah,
And
thank you
Teresa,
for
so
all your
to see you.
So great
thanks
to
for all
see
your
you
hard
too.
work.
Thanks, everybody.
All
Take
right.
care.
Bye-bye.
now.
Bye.
Well, thank you, listeners, for tuning in to the Produce Buzzers podcast, brought to you by Produce Buzz, the gathering place for lovers of fresh fruits and veggies. We hope you were entertained a bit and educated a lot about fresh produce. Be sure to join us next time, and please tell your friends to do so as well. Like, share, and comment on our Produce Buzz Facebook page, and check out our website at www.producebuzz.com. There you will find articles about fresh fruits and veggies, how to select, store, and prepare them, as well as lots of interesting facts about all the wonderful bounty the earth provides for us. Until next time, be fruitful and don't forget to veg out.